All right. Hello, Haas Knights. Ms. Wheel here. I am here today to continue with you on the lesson about adaptations. Today, I'd like us to make it through PowerPoint slides 19 all the way to 27. So we have a lot of stuff to do as usual. So I'd like to get right on into it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you. Perfect. So let's pick up where we left off. So remember last week we talked a little bit about the environment, what an ecosystem is, how is the ecosystem different from a community or a habitat, these very important vocab words. And if you haven't made yourself some flashcards with these words already to help you to study while you're not in front of the computer, I highly suggest that you go on ahead and do that. Today, hopefully, maybe you've already gone through the PowerPoint. If so, you've watched this video already. If not, this video is on adaptations, so make sure you give it a good look at. And remember that adaptations improve the chances of survival for an organism living in their environment. So this is a nice little brief recap about what we've been talking about physical adaptations versus behavioral adaptations. And they give a lot of really great examples. So in the physical adaptations, they're talking about if you're living on land, you need to be able to get air, right? So if you live on land, you probably have lungs, right? That's a physical adaptation. However, if you're living in the water, you probably have a different sort of structure to help you to obtain air, and those would be gills. So depending on your environment, you have some way of obtaining those basic needs for survival. Okay, they also talk a little bit about, for example, limbs like hands and feet, right? For organisms that live on land versus water-dwelling creatures, which probably have fins as a method of getting around. So those are some physical adaptations that they're going to talk about, and then some behavioral adaptations. Remember, behaviors are things that the animal is or plant or organism is doing in order to help it to survive. So talking about instincts, migration patterns, and different sort of life cycle differences that an organism can be adapting to as they continue through their life. So make sure that you check this out. Also, we're going to be introduced to a new concept in this video called natural selection. So natural selection, and make sure that this is an important vocab word so you write it down at some point, right, is the process of passing important traits for survival, which we know traits for survival are adaptations. So the process of passing important adaptations from parent to offspring. So from parent to kid, and when that kid grows up, it becomes a parent to their kids. So passing it on from generation to generation to generation. Okay, so when we're talking about natural selection, one thing that is important to be aware of is that this takes a long time. This is not a process that will just take one generation. It will take many, 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 many years and many, many, many generations in order for an adaptation to actually kind of be popular within a species. So also, I know along with these videos, there are some little tests that you can take when you click on those. And I highly suggest that once you finish watching the video, you give yourself a little bit of practice and test yourself out. Okay? All right, second video is all about plant adaptations, which actually we've talked about a lot. We've talked about the structure and function of plants. Even before this whole COVID thing was going down, we actually, some of us were pulled out of class and we did a dissection lab up with me in the maker's space. And we learned a lot about different structures that plants have, different organs and tissues that they have that have specific jobs that help them to survive. So thinking about seeds, flowers, floating plants, how do they float? Well, they have air spaces inside. What would be the advantage of that? Thinking about the location, where would a plant grow? And even sort of adaptations such as some plants have poisons and toxins in them, thorns, and even the size of the leaf would be one way that a plant may adapt to its environment. So again, I suggest that you watch this video very carefully and take notes along with it. And then I believe it also has a test to go along with it, so test yourself on that as well. Okay. All right, so Right now, we're going to be looking at different environments. And we're going to take a quick look at certain environments that animals and plants live in. And we're going to look at adaptations of organisms that live in those environments. So ways that those organisms can survive in these unique ecosystems. All right, so getting started. And by the way, I'm going to go through all of these very quickly. So please make sure you actually read the PowerPoints and be taking notes with them. The polar habitat is generalized by very cold weather. So organisms have adaptations there that should help them to survive cold weather, such as having blubber, or having fat, or having big paws, or having small ears, or having white fur, and things of that nature to help them to camouflage better into the snow and the ice up in the polar habitats, but also to help them to catch food or get energy, get water. Think about those basic needs. So the polar habitat is very intense. So obviously the organisms there are very unique and have adapted over many generations to have these traits that will help them to survive better. And those are called adaptations. The desert habitat is also a sort of extreme environment, which is categorized by hot weather during the day, cold weather at night, and very limited amount of rainfall. So if you're living in the desert, you need to have some sort of adaptations to protect yourself, such as maybe having spines or thorns, such as cacti. You have to have a way to store water. So thinking about particular ways that organisms can store water, like the cactus actually has kind of a compartment inside, just like camels do, in order to store water. So if they get a nice heavy rainfall, they can absorb a lot of water through their roots and store it for a long time. Of course, other animals will probably want to get to that water supply, so they have protection as well with their spines. So you can think that this is quite a extreme environment. And so the organisms there are very unique and very cool to study because they have a lot of unique adaptations to living in the desert ecosystem. All right, the forests are unique as well because they actually have something called seasons. We don't really have them here. We think we have spring, summer, fall, and winter. Unfortunately, here in South Florida, we have a wet season and a dry season. We don't really see spring, summer, fall, and winter. You might think we have pretty much summer all year round. So organisms that live in temperate forests need to be adaptable to surviving in such great changes that happen over the course of 1 year. And because these seasonal changes happen every year, over time, organisms can adapt to it. So for example, birds can shed their feathers and put on different colors. They migrate during the cold months and then come back during the warm months. So basically being able to survive and get all your basic needs in a very rapidly changing environment. Rainforests are categorized by pretty much warm weather and lots of rain. And oftentimes the rain will wash away the nutrients that's in the soil. So plants have to adapt to living in the rainforest by having very intense roots that have the ability to collect that water as well as nutrients from the soil. Other organisms have to be able to withstand predators because in the rainforest, since there's a lot of plants, there's going to be a lot of animals. So there's a lot of competition for food. There's a lot of predators and prey relationships going on there. So you want to survive. You want to be able to reach adulthood so that you can pass your beneficial traits on to your children and your children's children's children. So make sure that you read a little bit about the rainforests and some of the adaptations that you can find of organisms that live in this unique environment as well. Grasslands, categorized by pretty much just tons of grass, not a ton of water, but when it does rain, it goes through periods of monsoons, which means lots and lots of rain and then periods of dry months. So basically, you have to be adapted to be able to get water, store water, or find water. You have to be able to survive off of the food that you can find. So a lot of animals here do eat grass. As you can see, grass is all over the place. So it makes sense that there's a lot more grass eaters and a lot less true meat eaters out there. because it'll be a lot harder to find animals out there than plants. You can read a little bit more about the grasslands. And as you could see, based on colors, camouflage is one of those big deals as well. So you have to be able to be camouflaged into your environment to help you to survive as well. Feel free to read a little bit more about the grasslands, but I want to talk about one last ecosystem. And it's kind of a fun and unique one, and it's called the taiga. As a matter of fact, right here in the PowerPoint, it is one of your vocabulary words in yellow. The taiga is a northern habitat with very cold winters and short, warm summers. So very similar to those living in the forest, you have to be able to adapt to long winters, a little bit of short summer, but you have to be able to survive during both of those times. So oftentimes, organisms will either migrate or shed their fur, turn different colors, or do a lot of other unique adaptations in order to help them survive. And remember, it could be things that they're doing, behavioral adaptations, but it could also be physical adaptations. So for example, if you're looking at plants in the taiga or in northern habitats, usually you find a lot of like cone trees, like pine trees, and trees that produce needles because they can survive in cold environments a lot better than plants that have big, broad leaves. Okay, and I would highly suggest that you read a little bit more about pine cones and cones themselves and how they protect seeds and the adaptations that come along with that. We've talked a little bit about, especially in my group, we've talked a little bit about how the type of beak that a bird has allows it to seek certain types of food. So look a little bit on that as you're reading along as well. If you are interested in learning about even more adaptations than the ones that you're reading about today, I have a favorite Netflix TV show called Planet Earth. There's a few seasons of it out there, and I suggest if you're bored and you want to dig into this topic a little bit more, check that series out because they have some amazing videos of animals, plants, and organisms doing some amazing things in order to survive in their environment, which, as we all know, is called adapting. So if you're interested in seeing that, check that on out. But this is Miss Wiehl for today, and I'm done for now, but I will see you soon. If you have any questions about anything that you've been hearing about today, feel free to reach out to me or your science teacher. With any extra questions that you have, we'd be happy to answer them. All right, HAAS, hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye.